he was a Benjaminite,
Mm-hmm.
so he couldn't. Just talking in terms of order.
Right.
Not necessarily God's will, but just talking in terms of order.
He was not of the Levitical priesthood.
So he couldn't have been anointed the priest anyway, could he?
We also have David.
Yeah. The issue
the
issue is we have David.
And then we have Christ.
Who was not a biblical
Not a
priest.
Levi
Right.
either. Okay.
Courtney?
I think that's a powerful statement, what you were saying about idols in the heart, because at that point you have God's system with the priest,
Right.
and now you have the world system that they're embracing, and you can't do both. You have
can't
to
do both.
go one or the other.
Right. So it's very important to understand Saul, and any pastor that has the spirit of Saul, is an answer to the people.
Mm-hmm.
It is not God's will. It is not God's will. It's God's answer to what the people have set up in their heart. They want a man.
But generally, will then they have them the gifts of prophesying
Well, sure.
and governance, generally?
Saul did it, yeah. What you find today are the people who have this were actually called by God to be apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists. They were actually called. But then the call gets moved. Because to do that, to truly be a minister of God, you have to walk in the Spirit. You have to follow God. Well, they're no longer doing that. They've been kinged. They've been crowned. They don't serve God, they serve themselves. They talk God, but they serve themselves. And we see that more as we go through Saul. You can see that more and more and more and more. He's not serving God. He serves his boss. Well, who's his boss? The people that he thinks made him king. The people. He thinks the people made him king. They requested him. He's the answer to their request. So it's very important to understand this spirit. It's in our churches. It's in many of our pastors. But understand, this is God's answer to the idol of the people. It is not God's will for the people. Very important. Very important. Let's look at verse 9 here in 1 Samuel 10. So this man comes to God, and God changes him. It says in verse 9, and it was so that when he had turned his back to go from Samuel, God gave him another heart. And all those signs came to pass that day, all the signs that Samuel had told him. I want you to understand the significance of God giving him another heart. Today, as Christians, when we're born again, we get a whole new spirit. We get another heart. We go through the same process. Now, many Christians think, well, I'm a Christian, therefore. Well, we'll find out with Saul that was not enough. Just because God gave him a new heart didn't actually change him. He still served the people. Very important. Very important. Now let's jump to, let me look at verse 8. I want to point out something here in verse 8. The Samuel is about to give him some key instructions, and we'll see how these instructions play out. It says, and thou shalt go, this is verse 8 of 1 Samuel 10, and thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down unto thee to offer burnt offerings and to sacrifice sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days shalt thou tarry till I come and show thee what thou shalt do. Now, right here, Samuel is making sure he understands you are not a priest or a prophet. Because only priests and prophets can offer burnt offerings and give sacrifices of peace offerings. Okay? Very important. This right here, if you're confused up to this point, this establishes he's not in that line of priest. Because only priests and prophets were authorized to give the burnt offerings and the sacrifice of peace offerings. Very important for you to understand it. And we won't go there, but if you want to study this, go to Leviticus chapter 6 and Leviticus chapter 7, and it delineates all the types of offerings and who can do it and who can't and so forth. So you can see it spelled out in black and white for yourself. Leviticus 6 and Leviticus 7. But specifically, the prophet and the priest were the only ones who are authorized by God to give these burnt offerings and these sacrifices of peace offerings. Now let's go to 1 Samuel 13.